Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Clinical Trial Podcast. I'm your host, Kunal Sampat, where my job is to help you accelerate your clinical research career. Technology is the fabric of our modern world and plays an important role in the way we communicate and collaborate with each other on clinical research projects. Technology can help sponsors and clinical trial site personnel do their best work, but it can also cause confusion, delays, and inefficiencies. It can be difficult to evaluate technology products and find the one that meets your organization's requirements. It can be overwhelming to learn new technology and do things differently. It can lead to new questions about compliance with regulations. To get more insights about clinical research technology from a vendor's perspective, I invited Mike-Wenger on the Clinical Trial Podcast. Mike is a software developer with over 15 years of experience creating innovative solutions in clinical research. At Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research, Mike worked to connect Parkinson's patients with clinical trials. He later developed Citeline Connect, bridging patient recruitment companies with pharmaceutical organizations, and founded VersaTrial to streamline clinical trial site workflows. Mike is currently the founder of Full Stack Trials, a consultancy dedicated to helping clinical trial sites get the most of their technology investments. Please join me in welcoming Mike on the Clinical Trial Podcast.
Great clinical research professionals aren't born, they're built. In each episode, hear from leading experts in clinical trial management as they inspire and motivate you to become an effective leader. Welcome to the Clinical Trial Podcast. Here to help you accelerate your career is your host, Kunal Sampat.
Mike, thank you so much for joining me today on the Clinical Trial Podcast. I'm really pumped to have you on the show, so thank you.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Kunal.
Mike, I want to maybe start off with how do you describe yourself? Because I know you've been doing a lot of different things. Can you tell us a little bit about your career and kind of, yeah, I think people would love to know more.
How to describe myself? I guess I'm someone that's always been very curious. Growing up as a kid, I think my mom probably was annoyed with me by the number of times I would ask why, but why, and why is this, and why is that, and why can't it be this way? And so I think that curiosity and that things don't have to be the way they are, or let's understand why they are the way they are. Tracked through college and beyond, and so. After college, I found myself working on identifying a lot of problems and challenges and wanted to be able to solve and fix them. And I had a couple of friends that became software developers, and I kind of realized, wow, that's a really amazing tool set where you can create something, you can build something, you can put a solution in front of someone and they can like it or hate it or get value out of it, but it's something that didn't exist yesterday and it exists today and it could be better tomorrow. And so that idea of building and creating really was at the beginning of my career. And so I would describe myself as a builder, someone that likes to build. And over time, I found that I really fell in love with the clinical research industry. My first exposure to it was when I was at the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's research, helping build clinical trial matching software to connect Parkinson's patients to studies, helping build things like the patient longitudinal registry to understand how the disease evolves over time. And I think I saw a very complex industry, but I saw an industry that was moving science forward, that was having a positive impact on patients' lives. And it was an industry that I wanted to continue to build in. And so since that day, I've been hooked. I've been in several different technology roles, building solutions for doctors' offices, iPads in the waiting room, building solutions that help pharma companies better work with their patient recruitment partners, building solutions for clinical trial sites to help them better understand and optimize their workflows. A builder in the clinical research space is the best way to describe me.
I love it. So when you was the first job out of college at the Michael J. Foundation, or
a brief tenure before that where I tried to start a company with a co-founder who was a software developer. And I did not know how to code at the time. I didn't know what HTML or CSS was, and realized that, hey, I wanted to create something. I don't know how to. So got really lucky, found an amazing co-founder. We met through the internet. We had coffee and we started a small company together. And I got to see firsthand just how amazing it is when you do have a software development skill set and was really jealous of this person's capabilities. And it really motivated me to hunker down and learn that tool. And then after that, had the fortune of joining the Fox Foundation.
Love it. So can you code now?
I haven't written as much code in recent years, but yes, I'm a software developer. I think I get my most energy when there's code in front of me and something is evolving and software is being developed. That I really enjoy that, both as an individual contributor of writing code, but also seeing a team of people come together and make something real.
Yeah. What were some of the challenges you faced, like trying to bridge your love for software and clinical research, and probably like there was probably some knowledge gaps you had, and I'm curious how you ended up filling those gaps.
I love the clinical research industry. It is an incredibly complex industry. I think most people who are builders or software developers have friends who are in other industries, and you can appreciate and say, okay, well, if I'm a sales team, I'm probably going to need a CRM like Salesforce. And so I can think through the features and functionality that person might need. And I can convince them that we're better than Salesforce and they're going to buy our software. Like there's a very clear path to find my persona that I want to go deep on, do some discovery, put some prototypes, build something, win them over, path to revenue, path to a profitable business. When it comes to the clinical research industry, I think things just get really challenging for a bunch of different reasons. And as a result, it is a little bit unfortunate, but I think it makes innovation hard. During my tenure, I've seen a lot of really energized builders enter the space. And I've seen them sadly leave a year or two later when they've struggled to get going. And I would say that some of the challenges, it makes sense that they're never going to go away. But the challenges are there's a lot of different stakeholders. So a pharma versus a CRO versus a site versus a patient versus a vendor versus the FDA. Like everyone has their different perspective of what's important or what is and is not possible. And who is paying for things, who is using things might also be different many times. So a pharma provider is paying for something, but the patient is the end user or the site is the end user. And so when there's a disconnect there, that might lead to issues with user experience or the technology not being as good as that it was spoken about in the sales process and things like that. So and then of course you have a highly regulated industry where we can't make mistakes. Billions of dollars have been invested to get a compound to a phase 3 study. We can't have an IRT system or another system making mistakes in a real life clinical trial, negatively impacting patients' lives. So the appetite for taking chances and fail quickly, and like in a lot of other industries, it's all about just innovate. Rightfully so, we have to be a little bit more strategic with our innovation, a little bit more calculated, focus on how we can de-risk that. And so procurement rightfully needs to exist in our industry, but the way I believe procurement works today is that it really almost hampers it to the point too far on the other side of the spectrum, where it takes years to get a solution through to an MSA agreement and get your first logo at a pharma company. And a lot of folks that are trying to innovate in the space don't have years to kind of build out those relationships and build those, get through the procurement cycle, but they have really good ideas that should be given a chance in some way.
So that's a good segue into our follow-up discussion on like supplier selection and management. And I want to ask you, like, why do you think that's the case? Why is procurement like so challenging? What about it makes it so difficult? I mean, I just see that I don't see how it's any different in clinical research personally than in any other field, because I think you're trying to make a sale, you're trying to get on the other side. And there's always going to be some people not blocking you, but trying to make it difficult, make you jump through hoops. So I'm trying to understand like what about it is hard. I mean, I'm not denying it's not hard. I'm just
yeah. I think there's a couple different stakeholders in that process. So there's obviously the person that's working in procurement. There's the person that's working at the pharma or the CRO or the site who's championing the solution that they want to take through the procurement process. Mm-hmm. Then there's the vendor that's hoping to get through the process and be able to deploy their solution. So in that environment, I think one of the challenges is on the vendor side, you're saying the same thing to multiple potential customers, but you're running through very different processes and questionnaires and audits and interviews that are very time intensive on both ends. You're doing the same due diligence is being done, but it's custom every time. Pharma A versus Pharma B versus CRO C. They all want to make sure that you're following GCP and that you're have proper multi-tenant restraints on your database and that you have insurance in place. But the amount of time that's just spent on answering custom procurement questionnaires and going through that process is an order of magnitude weeks and months of time on both ends. So I know there's been some efforts to try to standardize that across organizations, but I do think if, similar to college applications, I was fortunate. I think the Common App came out just when I was beginning to apply. And so I didn't have to do 20 different applications, 20 different colleges. I was to have a core common app to just say, here's, the main thing about me. And if you want to get special on top of that, let's do that. But it doesn't make sense for us to ask the same question 20 different ways and struggle to even understand what is being asked oftentimes. The other thing on the procurement side is there's a lot of risk, and no one wants to be the person that signed off on something that caused an issue on a trial. And so I have personally been on a lot of calls where it's just easy to say no or, misunderstand something in a document and almost kind of start from that default no position. And the only way you can get through that is if you have a strong champion that really needs your solution that will push back against that red tape. And finding that champion within pharma is hard. I really appreciate the folks that do, because it's not, a 1-2 week process. So you're committing several months of time and energy, and you're putting your name on the line to make innovation happen. That, long time horizon makes it tough for people to might just give up and say, hey, it's not worth it. I'm not going to be here next year. So why, try to make this big investment for something that's not going to be during my time. But for the folks that do it, it's a necessary part of the process. And I think it's very worth acknowledging them. I think one of the things that's tough is for a lot of these folks that are the champions that are guiding people through the procurement process, they are oftentimes learning the procurement process for the first time themselves, because it's not a very well documented, formalized process that you can just go and read in the internal company how-to guide of, okay, submit this piece of paper, talk to this person, prepare in these ways. It feels like it's very convoluted, even internally within the organization, which then means, there was a misstep. I thought we were further along. Missed expectations on both ends of, is it going to be ready for that study or not? And that unknown puts the vendors at risk, because they have to, build a business. They're chasing different opportunities, and something that they think is possible in a certain time frame and all of a sudden that gets doubled. That is unfortunate.
Yeah. So let's walk someone like new that's like reaching out to a clinical research like technology supplier and wants to source their services. Like, say, what does that process look like right now, and what's and kind of want to understand what challenges people are facing, at least what suppliers are facing right now, the way you see it. You kind of touched on some of it, but I want to maybe dig a little deeper.
So I've never sat in this role. I've been on the vendor side, but from what I've heard from friends or have seen, there's different buyers in the industry. So there's sites that are buying technology, and that could be a large site network backed by private equity. It could be a small site. It could be an academic medical center. They're investing dollars in building their own technology stacks and their own tooling. You also have CROs buying or building their own technology solutions. And then you have pharma and biotech buying and provisioning solutions. So depending on which of those persona, you might be at different conferences where there's going to be a vendor hall, and there will be a lot of folks building solutions for you. So I would say conference is a big place of discovery. I've seen a lot of colleagues going to great events at Scope or DPharm on the pharma CRO side. On the site side, a lot of folks will be going to the SCRS conferences or the SOS conference, and seeing what vendor solution providers are active, either more established because they have the big booth and are having the big party in the evening, or maybe the new scrappy startup that's running around with a laptop and just trying to grab people's time and attention. So that time away from your desk is a really good opportunity to see what's being built in the space, what is something that has been there for 5 to 10 years, and it's a incumbent, and what innovations are those incumbents bringing forward, and what new companies are coming forward with, either iterating on existing capabilities or brand new capabilities that you had never considered before. I do think one of the challenges is, for anyone that's bringing a new capability forward, there is a education period of time where pharma or CROs need to educate themselves on that capability, need to create where in the the cost structure of the business that line item exists, and what is its value. So again, it's amazing when innovation is possible and people are able to bring new things, but a lot of time goes into from building to then educating, getting through procurement, getting that first logo. It's a long time horizon that you have to be prepared for, and you have to be experienced in. It's not something you can just kind of wing it and figure it out, because there's a lot of pitfalls that will slow you down. And I do think it's unfortunate, but that old saying where no one gets fired for hiring McKinsey, it exists in our industry as well, where if you're that innovative group that's doing something new and you don't have your first logo, your first customer logo, not a lot of folks take a flyer on that. They're more used to waiting in the presentation to see the logo slide, and they want to see 5 of their peers up there, or they want to see 8 of the top 10 pharma, or they want to see that you've been around for 3 years, because they do know that startups come and go. And for them to put a big bet on you as a business and make sure that you're going to be a critical technology in their solution moving forward, rightfully so, they want to have confidence that you'll have resources behind you to keep investing and be there in a couple of years. And it's hard to do that when you're right out the gate and you're building a 0 to 1 solution that's never existed before.
Yeah. So when I was preparing for our conversation, I didn't my experience has all been on the medical product side of, like, the sponsor side, not so much on the site or the CRO side, a little bit on the CRO side. So it's kind of interesting to know the nuance with the logo conversation. I think what you're saying is people are buying what other people are buying, like want to buy what other people are buying, I guess, right? And you on that. Um, how do we is there an opportunity, because there's always going to be the first time buyer, no matter which product or technology it is. So how does somebody kind of how do we get people to take a chance is my question.
Yeah. So I definitely have thought about this a lot. I think the tough thing is, even just saying the word pilot, you're talking about a pilot on a real study, right? Like, so that's real patients, a real drug, and an interventional study, whatever it might be. And so very few people will take a new innovation and put it on the big bet, the big phase 3. Like, that's not where people start. So as a result, it's kind of this interesting, there's limited windows to try to bring innovation in a lower risk environment where the if you make a mistake, it's not catastrophic. It's a smaller,
I see.
isolated pilot. But as a result, like, a lot of times, I'm a software developer. Software evolves. You have software that is mature. You have software that is brand new, that has not been tested in a production environment. You have software where new capabilities are getting added all the time that either have or have not been tested in a production environment. And so as a result, I think what's tough is things might fail for a couple of different reasons. It might fail because the idea wasn't good. It might fail because the tech was not mature enough or built in the right way that it did what it was supposed to do. Or it might have failed because the project wasn't scoped with the right KPIs to be a winner on the pharma side. And so all of those things have various failure points. And Craig Lipset, who's a friend in the space, used to work at Pfizer, and I was sitting like, Craig, why isn't there like a clinical research Disney World central hub that has the simulation of a site experience, all of the investigator meetings are held at this centralized space. Lots of patient advocacy groups are regularly meeting there, and a hub that brings people together, but has the simulation of real world environments where there's a doctor's office and there's doctors, and you can test the ePro system and the eCOA system, and you can have the IRT running, and you're doing it in a way that is simulation of real, because there's folks that maybe have that condition that are present through patient advocacy relationships, and the vendors are there, and the potential buyers of the technologies are there, so they can see it in action, not as a demo in a pitch meeting,
Right.
and touch it and feel it and be like, yeah, that's going to break for these reasons. I think that would be incredibly valuable for our industry. I think it's a tough thing to do. Craig rightfully said it involves a tremendous amount of collaboration, because the value unlock would be, hey, we're like pooling this experimentation as a larger group. But I think that would be really interesting, because it would allow it to be clear, like, what might break in a system, and let's catch it before it actually negatively impacts a patient or someone working at a site. Because that's the front lines. Like, there's no simulation.
Got it.
You pick a vendor, you buy the software, and then you cross your fingers and you hope it works.
So, just make sure what I'm understanding. So, if there was like a conference that was happening, you're saying if there was like a simulation, like a place to like actually simulate the real world, like experience, like you would have a real patient, you'd have a real coordinator, you'd have a real doctor, maybe, or role playing, I don't know. But then you actually using that product and seeing how it performs in that environment.
Yeah, like, I mean, this is a little wishful thinking, but if anyone's like listening to this and is like, wow, that's so outside the box, I'd like to talk about it more. I feel there's nothing that's been worked on in this area, but the way I could envision this working is there's a physical space that year round is just set up in this staging ground.
I see.
And it's co-invested by multiple players that say, this is going to be our simulation testing space. Mm-hmm. And then throughout the year, there's a 2-week stretch that is dedicated to Parkinson's, and all the Parkinson's advocacy groups are invited. All of the investigators that work in Parkinson's and the biotechs and pharma that are interested in Parkinson's can come. The vendors that are serving Parkinson's rating scales and devices that might be relevant can all go to that space during that period. And you could set aside time so that it's not just a normal conference where slides are presented, but you actually would be saying, great, for this study, we're maybe considering testing 5 different things. Let's put that in front of a Parkinson's patient that knows they're in a simulation. It's not a real study, but let's see how that goes. And because we have the coordinator there with the PI, let's see what their experience is on the site side of this new eCOA capability that's Parkinson specific, because we want to make sure that they have a good experience and it's not buggy, and they're not going to be running into issues in a real study environment.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I think it's such a great idea.
You want to team up on it? Or is that something?
I think
we'll
so.
Save that for a future one.
I am very gravitated towards getting people together in general. And I'm also very gravitated towards events and planning good experiences for people, which is why I was very interested in what you were saying about this topic.
Just to that point real quick before we close out, I love conferences. I am a conference junkie. I have a lot of good friends that are in the patient advocacy space, and they will often make the observation and the comment and look around the room when they're on stage and say, I see a lot of execs here. I don't see a lot of patients. Or I see a lot of execs and vendors. I don't see a lot of clinical research coordinators. And so what is, I think, unfortunate, again, is the folks that are most impacted by bad technology, because they are the end users, are very rarely in the conferences or in the conversations when the buying is happening.
Got it. Yeah. We would still need to get IRB approval, I guess, if you were having, not IRB, but some sort of ethical consent process that the patient knows like they're in a simulated environment, I guess, right?
Yeah.
With what you're explaining. Not trying to create roadblocks, but I guess that if we're trying to operationalize it.
I will say, having worked at the Fox Foundation and knowing a lot of folks at other advocacy groups, patients are amazing in terms of what they can do. And I
Sure.
think a lot of times, if you're running a study and you got to get 100 patients, like it can be like very transactional, and it can feel like, okay, like I need to get a top of a funnel and I just need to get to my 100 number. And that's what is my focus. But the patient is a person. Maybe an interventional study is not the right experience for them. So even though you get a screen failure, someone that says no, like that's, someone on the other end, but they are still very engaged with their disease, and they are still very engaged in wanting to do what they can. And so when I was at the Fox Foundation, one of the things that we always talked about was this ladder of things that you can do that might start with donating $5. And then the next step is you run a marathon. And then the next step is you complete a observational questionnaire survey. And then you're participating in a longitudinal registry. And then maybe down the road, you're eventually participating in an interventional study if it's a good fit for you. But it's not this like 0 or 1, like they're in or they're out. You're
Right.
giving more options to ways they can help. And I do think there's a lot of folks that maybe aren't, the interventional study is not the right fit for them, but they would be happy to go to a simulated event or an event that brings their folks together
Sure.
to test new devices
Yeah.
in a more structured form.
Yeah. I love it. What a great idea. So I'm not sure if we talked about this, but maybe what are your expectations from a sponsor, CRO, or site when you actually, you're giving a bid proposal, and then like what's the expectation on the supplier side? Because I feel like that expectation is never clear to the buyer. I just
Yeah.
think they're just thinking about like, oh, I need to deal with procurement, or I need to like get my boss's approval to get this technology onboarded, or I need to figure out like how are we going to do this something new in our current workflow. And I think they're just so centered around their world that they fail to, I think a lot of times fail to kind of empathize with the supplier. So I'm just trying to see how that could change.
Yeah. It's very fulfilling to be a supplier or a vendor, because you're, in that build mindset, and you're bringing something new to the industry that's needed. It requires patience, because you might not get the bid. A competitor might beat you. You might not get the bid because they decide ultimately they don't have this as a need at this time, and they're going to status quo it and keep it easy. And we're concerned about next year and IP patents cliffs. And so like we've talked a good game that we're innovative, but we're going to postpone the innovation for next year. Or you might get past the process and you're selected, and now you're ready to go and pilot, and the study's teed up, and you've invested time, and the training's ready to go. And for whatever reason, that study doesn't move forward for reasons outside of everybody's control.
Sure.
So there's just a lot of things you can try to improve in the process to get through it faster. But
Yeah.
like anything, a lot of things are outside of your control. So it is to be a vendor, you have to have that patience. You have to ride the highs with the lows.
Yeah.
I do think it also is very different depending on the type of vendor you are. Like, are you selling SaaS software? Is that software being used in a pilot setting where you got to keep proving yourself to stay relevant? Or is this an enterprise deal and you've sold a system to a site, and now you're in, and there's a 3-year contract, and now you got to switch gears and focus on rollout and implementation and making sure the group gets the most out of the tool and their investment that they've now committed to. So I do think the observations that I have there would be like the purchase of tech is not the finish line. It's a big milestone because it means two folks are coming together in a nice marriage, but now you got to make the marriage work. And so I think every vendor, will have stories here of, we nailed our implementation. We were on site. Everybody was really happy, and we're really sticky, and they write really good reviews about us online. And then there's also instances of, for whatever reason, the site or the pharma had other competing priorities. They never gave us a proper shot at doing it right. There were some missteps in the configuration, whatever it might be. And we're at risk because our solution wasn't rolled out based on the plan we put together. So I would say for a lot of folks that are operating in this space, either on the vendor side or the buyer side, like the just because you bought it or you sold it doesn't mean the job is done. Now we need to make sure it's actually being utilized to its fullest
I
intent.
see.
And that's where I'm not as familiar with this on the pharma CRO side from personal experience, but what I have seen on the site side is that's where some challenges do come up, because especially on the site side, you're not usually buying one solution. Usually you're buying a stack of solutions to cover your different workflows.
Yep.
So you'll have a EHR system where the patient's records are living. You'll have a clinical trial management system, or CTMS. You'll have a electronic investigator site file system. You'll have a CRM to manage your business development deals, and you'll have maybe a different patient database for recruitment, and you'll have a call center, and you'll have maybe a startup that is doing EHR querying to find patient matching. And so there's like maybe some core technologies your team is spending a lot of time in, and then there's some adjacent technologies. And so what gets really tough there is the integrations and how those come together in an optimized workflow is very tricky. And it's being solved for by sites primarily whose main skill set is, I'm a medical person and I'm really good at talking with patients, but I'm not a technologist. And so I'm being asked to be very proficient in these different technologies, but I struggle, and I as a result don't like the technology because it makes my job harder. I wish we could go back to paper. Like that's a very common thing that might happen, because it is different than other industries where, hey, you're a salesperson, you're only working in one sales system all day, every day, and you're going to get really good and proficient at it. This is a fragmented ecosystem of tools that are coming together that you have to be proficient at while managing all of your non-technology responsibilities.
You've worked in technology, for a while, and I wanted to maybe get some input from you in terms of like pricing. Maybe it's more for me to learn. When you are trying to do like a long-term contract, how do you think about like pricing for future years?
So pricing is a fun one, because there's always are we leaving money on the table, or are we pricing ourselves out? Are we talking to pharma? Are we talking to a site? Different budgets, different mindsets involved. Are we talking to a pharma that's in growth mode? Or are we talking to a pharma that's got some risk ahead and is shrinking and has concerns? So I think just the price itself is a really interesting thing, because there's different models. You could charge per study. You could charge per patient. You could charge per site. You could charge a flat rate. You could have it's not that common in our space, but you could have freemium, where it's free to start and then you pay more as you go. So like, just what is the strategy there as part of it? And then obviously as a vendor, you would love to get a 3 to 5 year commit. That's I think hard in a lot of procurement cycles if you're not a proven established player with the logo slide and with the existing, hey, we've had an MSA together for 10 years and now we've launched a new capability and you like it, so you have trust in us as a vendor. I think on both ends, on the buyer side, you're going to really want to make sure you know what you're getting before you're going to do any sort of multi-year commitment.
I see. Got it. When I was talking to you about the supplier expectations, I was mostly interested in like people like ghosting suppliers and then like not getting back to them. How do you tackle that? And like, I'm just curious, what are some ways both the buyer and the supplier can kind of hold each other accountable to communication or communicating better?
So that is definitely something that happens. I gave a talk last year at the Innovation Gathering where I used the metaphor of the champion within the pharma is like your Sherpa, and you're the vendor, and you're just trying to like help get to the top of the mountain with the Sherpa helping you. And so I have a lot of admiration and respect for folks who are Sherpas within large companies. I can appreciate the bureaucracy that would exist in a large mid-sized pharma. And is going to bat for you as a vendor. And so that takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of relationship building. And so I think a lot of people, really try to make stuff happen and then realize maybe they outside of their control just hit an impasse, or priorities realigned, or reorg is coming, whatever it might be, and now the vendor is at risk. And I would encourage those folks to be like honest with the vendor. I know it's bad news, and not everyone likes to share bad news, but I do think that it's better for them to have realistic expectations of what are their chances on goal, rather than just making it feel like it's optimistic and dodging them when maybe things are turning sideways.
Mm.
So on the vendor side, that's important to build the bridges and find those Sherpas and work closely with them and try to have check-ins with them. And I think it
Yeah.
also speaks to the timing and the importance of timing, because the window might be open right now, and there's budget and things are looking good and the study's still on track, and let's make this happen. But
Hmm.
3 to 6 months from now, that window might be partially closing or is closed. And
Sure.
so if you're going through procurement and the audit's taking longer, or there's a finding, you need to go back and do something, and now there's a second round, all of that delay puts your window at delay as well. So I think there's on the vendor and the Sherpa side, the two just staying closely coordinated and aware is a key way to make sure that you don't miss the window before it closes.
Got it. Um, when you're launching a new software product, or even maybe a service that's not software but clinical research service, are there certifications that these vendors need to get? I mean, is there stuff that is here's how if you're starting a new site, they'll say, "Oh, do you have a GCP certification completed?" Is there stuff like that? There's the ISO. I've heard of that, but I want to hear from you. What are the key pillars of what are the key things that people usually ask for almost always?
Yeah, so it depends, again, what your solution is and where you fall. The one that I've had a lot of experience in from a couple of companies that I've been a part of is 21 CFR Part 11 is a regulation that if your solution is getting into things like digital signatures, things like that, you will 100% have to check this box, and that'll be like a showstopper if you can't say that you're in compliance with that regulation. The other thing too that I think for a lot of folks is, especially when you're starting out as a new vendor, you're just trying to get something going, trying to get some skin in the game, and you have a couple of sites here in the US that are using your tech, and you're pitching a pharma for the first time, and they're going to hit you right away with, well, how many sites are in your using your tool or in your system, and are you in Europe yet, and how many in Europe, and what's your Asia Pac presence? And you're kind of sitting there, you're like, I have 5 sites. So I think for those folks, I think you have to have a really good story to explain why your solution will be able to operate at scale and be ready for Europe and Asia Pac. And if you're doing that, you're going to be asked questions like, is it multilingual? How are you handling GDPR? Do you have a database in Europe for French regulators? If we're going to go to Asia Pac, is your multilingual set so that it can do languages that go from right to left? So maybe you don't do all that today because you're a small startup and you haven't made those investments yet. But those questions will come, and they come sooner than you expect, because I think most pharma are used to dealing with large incumbents that are operating at that enterprise scale level. And so they're used to hearing, yes, we're GDPR. Yes, we have studies, and we've conducted studies with our technology in Japan already, and we have the right to left, and look at our logo slide. So you have to compete with that and find ways to say, well, maybe we don't have that, but we can build confidence that we're getting there, or through partnerships we get there, or whatever it might be. But those questions will come up.
So addressing each of those objections or thinking through those proactively before entering into the conversation.
Yeah, or just not getting caught flat-footed when they come up. But definitely, there will always be the how many sites or how many patients do you have in your thing, and then the next follows will be either a multilingual thing, because people are always cognizant of multiple languages, and then if you're dealing with IT, security, procurement, audit folks, then it's going to quickly go into and say the standard questions there, like what type of in cybersecurity insurance policy do you have, and how many. What's your plans when the database goes down? What do your SOPs look like for disaster recovery? You can't wing that. you have to be ready to go on day one, because that if you don't have experience there, or don't have someone that can help you get experience there,
Mhm.
that's a high red flag risk for a
Mhm.
potential buyer to say, these folks are green, they're new, they built something cool and slick, but they're newbies in this industry, and they don't know like the risks the way we know them.
Makes sense. Um, Anything else you want to add on the supplier selection or process side of things?
I would challenge just folks in the audience, depending on where you're sitting. Make sure you're incorporating the input of the end users. So, I mean, this is a little tongue in cheek, but like if you're, buying tech and you're in a pharma or CRO or site, and you're not using this, but somebody else is, find ways to get their input on it, and how it compares to alternatives, because a lot of people in our industry hate technology. I love technology. Like, I love building. Technology is amazing. You look outside of our industry, and you know whether it's a chat GPT, or when Kayak came out, or when Uber came out, like, technology can be life-changing and game-changing. And people love their Apple MacBooks. But in our industry, technology is often a bad word or term, because so many people have been burned by it. Either the technology doesn't do what it's supposed to, or it's really not thinking through a good user experience. And so I do think we need to find a way to change that collectively as an industry. And the best way to do that is make sure the folks that are on the front lines, that are getting the crappy experience, their voices are at least incorporated in the process. Maybe you still have to go with that vendor because they have a lot of logos, but I would then go with them and say, hey, we got some, pretty bad feedback that the site system's really slow to load, or the user experience is 20 clicks to do a simple thing. What's
Yep.
your, roadmap plan to fix that, and challenge the vendors? Because the only way the vendors will react and do stuff is if the buyers are aware of the problem and hold them to task.
I see. I love it. Because I've been working on a couple of projects, and I know the software sucks. Like, just the user interface is really difficult to navigate, and it's clunky, and nobody's reached out to me for feedback because
Yeah.
nobody's doing it.
And again, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where, like, if I bought that technology and I was paying for this Salesforce thing in front of me, and I was like, oh, this is really buggy, I'm canceling the contract. I'm not gonna work with them next month. I'm gonna go find an alternative. In our industry, people don't have that choice. They're just prescribed, hey, this is what you have to do on our study.
Right. Hmm.
Deal with it.
So what's the solution to that? Is there any, because it's so hard to transition mid study. Like, if you have a project going on, it's just
Yeah.
hard to change a change a supplier. Like, it's really difficult.
I think the other thing I would have observed is there is a power dynamic relationship. I think everyone knows it's there, but like, it's worth calling out. If you're a site, you have to make sure the pharma likes you and wants to work with you, and they are your only path to revenue. Like, if you
Sure.
are, a squeaky wheel and you don't play nice in the sandbox, you're going to put your pipeline and your studies at risk.
Right.
So there's very different conversations when you're talking to a site at a conference, and it's the business development person, and you're saying like, hey, I've heard of this, technology system we've used on our last few studies. How's it going? And the
Yeah.
BD person's going to be like, oh yeah, yeah, the team's totally proficient. It will, any time of day we'll do it. That's a very different conversation than then going to the research coordinators who aren't at that conference, who are like, this technology is the bane of my existence, and we lost 5 patients in this study because I couldn't randomize them into the study. Like that,
Yeah.
like, just because you talked to a site didn't mean you maybe got like the full story based on who you were talking to and how, in the context you were talking to them.
Yeah. But I'm also talking about, like, from a sponsor perspective, like a sponsor using CTMS or, um, yeah.
Well, sorry. So even just there is an acronym called CTMS, and it's actually two very different products. And I
Correct.
think as an
Yep.
industry, we need to like fix that, because
Yep.
there is a pharma CTMS, where there is a user experience where pharma or CROs are managing their clinical trials in the clinical trial
Sure.
management system. There is a site CTMS where the site
Exactly.
is doing the same. It is very different capabilities. It is very different vendors. And the amount of times when I've been in conversations with pharma and they're not aware of the existence of a site CTMS, and we get, confused because of the acronym
Yeah.
bingo board. Like
Yeah.
that is an opportunity, I think, to educate people to say, well, I know what my tech stack looks like. What do other people's tech stacks look like? And,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people in the industry will say integrations and, or let's build one big hub for it all to come together in. But like, we just need to be aware of what's on the board first, because I think a lot of people don't know what site tech stacks look like.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think I agree. I think this CTMS nuance or difference between site and sponsor was discussed on one of my previous podcast episodes.
Yeah,
So thank you for
such a
highlighting it again.
solvable problem. It's such a solvable
Yeah.
problem. Like, hey guys, let's just
Yeah.
create a new acronym, like, or
Yeah. We've talked, yeah, I think my user interface like issues were with like even IRB portals. They're like really clunky, and
Mhm.
it's hard to navigate through some of this for a new person. And if you're not tech savvy, it becomes really challenging to
Yeah.
use these sites.
The other thing I would say, and I'm trying to, where's the magic
Mm.
wand of what would I
Yep.
try to do different if we
Yep.
could all get together
Sure.
and collaborate?
Hmm.
What an experience that I had. Well, I think most people acknowledge you very rarely like grow up being like, I'm going to work in clinical trials. Like you're not in high school or college and you're like, oh, I'm going to
Sure.
go do that. We all just kind of haphazardly stumble into it or fall into it or
Sure.
find some way to get here. And so the on ramp to enter the industry is not like a primary on ramp compared to other careers. But people find it, principal investigators find it, research coordinators find it, executives at pharma find it, like people find it. But where there's the weakest on ramp is for technical talent, software engineers, developers. Those folks know nothing really about this industry, but they don't have a lot of peers from nursing school or med school that like talk about clinical studies. And the experience that always resonated with me, I remember I was living in New York City at the time, and Boulder, Colorado was really trying to attract engineering talent. And they paid for developers all around the country to fly out to Boulder. They housed everybody. They walked everyone down the main drag and showed them all the innovative startups and made introductions, had a bunch of nice events, and were able to recruit talent to Boulder because they prioritized it and they invested in it. And in a perfect world, I think most of the vendors and the pharma would acknowledge that there's not a lot of I mean, there are folks, don't get me wrong, I don't mean to knock folks that are in the industry, but like there could be way more technical software developers, AI experience, data experience players coming in the space and giving them better on ramps so that they could learn about GCP and like how the different complexities of the system, and they make like a nice experience so that it attracts talent. Right now, it's like, I could imagine it's really hard to find somebody that is top tier technical talent and has been in the industry for 10 years and knows all the complexity of the industry and is available to go work on something new. Like that's a tough combo to find a lot of people that meet that criteria.
That'd be a really good skill set to develop, right? Like marrying clinical research knowledge with the programming skill set. Is that what you're kind of
Exactly.
talking about? Yeah.
Exactly. And as a result, I think, a lot of the dev shops or a lot of the maybe vendors in the space, because there's not as much like engineering talent to source and pull from,
Yeah.
that leads to a lot of working with consultants or outsourced groups, which, you can still ship product and get capabilities out there, but that has it's nice if there's just like a very rich ecosystem of engineering talent to draw from.
To draw from. Got it. So if I were to ask you, like, so I teach at San Jose State. I teach graduate students in clinical trials, and I want to help them like improve their skill sets and be more marketable. So what if they were interested in software? What kind of software coding languages do you recommend they kind of get their hands around?
Yeah, it's an amazing time right now. AI has really lowered the barrier to entry for non-technical folks to actually ship real things in code, or accelerate the learning curve to get dangerous with coding. So there's lots of different programming languages and web application frameworks that you can go with, and that's a do you like Pepsi or Coke type of debate. So I
Yeah.
won't weigh in on that one. But if I was talking something like there's tools like Cursor or Bolt or V0. These are all tools that either allow you to write code or generate real code mockups of user interface and like web apps.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be an expert. You can just talk to it as if you're talking to ChatGPT, and it will start building for you, and you can learn along the way. So I would really say, like, for anyone where you're like, oh, like it's a bummer. I wish I was a computer science major in college, and then I could have been a developer. I wasn't a computer science major. I learned to code post college. I sat in a Barnes and Nobles, like just reading books back in the day, and I think there's way better ways to learn nowadays that allow you to not spend years trying to learn a skill set, and you could do it hunker down in a month or two and actually get something really neat out in the world and become a builder. It's fun to be a builder.
I love it. So you said the name was Cursor, Cursor. Is that what it's called?
Cursor.ai. Like that's one of the
.ai.
developer tools that kind of brings AI and coding together.
And the other
In a
one was Bolt, B-A-L-T.
Bolt, Bolt.
B-A-L-T. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's way more options beyond just those. But if you just look into, I would Google a couple of keywords like no code would be like, I want to ship something and I don't actually want to code. Or you might say, okay, I want to like use one of these newer tools where I'm actually writing the code, but it's more of the AI is doing it on my behalf and I'm driving it and guiding it.
Yeah, so no code tools basically, right? And the third one, sorry, is we not or we zero?
V0. It's
Okay.
a solution from a company, VersaTrial, and you just go and it's ChatGPT, and you just say, "Hey, I want a website that looks like Facebook or looks like LinkedIn, but is for the clinical research community. Generate me 3 pages of what that looks like," and it will just create nice, high fidelity mock-ups that you could make a real website or a real web application with.
Love it. Thank you for sharing those. So go to Google, search no code applications, or is that what you're saying? Like no code?
Yeah, that's a good way to, and I
Yeah,
can share some more links and resources that you
yeah,
can share
that'd be great.
afterwards.
Yeah, I want to put that in the show notes for people to take a look in case they were interested. But my like I had some students talk to me about like programming languages like R, for example, like they
Mm.
wanted to learn or Python. And I kind of encouraged them to check out LinkedIn Learning for some of the courses there. I don't know. What do you think about my recommendation? Am I spot on, or do you feel like
Uh,
I'm
I'm not as familiar with like where R starts or finishes. I know that's on like the data visualization side.
right? Right.
Python though is like the number one choice if you really want to get into machine learning, data science, and AI. I would say that
Yeah.
is the tool
Hmm.
of choice at the moment.
Yeah.
And you can still build web applications with Python, so that's a nice universal tool for anyone to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would say, uh, I mean, I'm definitely drinking the AI Kool-Aid. But if you're not, interacting with Chat GPT 100 times a day, asking it questions and like, or Chat GPT alternatives, um, the capabilities of those systems of what those companies are putting out is really changing what's possible. And so just being aware of it, understanding how are people using AI in other industries and trying to bring that creativity back to our space. That would be this is one of those once in a lifetime opportunities, similar to when the internet was invented. AI
Yep.
was not accessible 3 to 5 years ago to regular folks. And now the most powerful AI capabilities in the world are just an API call away, and you pay a couple pennies on the dollar to add it to
Hmm.
your system. So, spend a couple months learning Cursor. You learn what you can do with an open AI or an Anthropic, and all of a sudden you have a really innovative technology that 3 years ago would have taken years to build or might not even been possible. And today it's possible.
I love it. Thank you for inspiring me. Actually, I'm sure others will love it. Love hearing this conversation. How do you learn? What's your process for learning?
When I uh, So the one thing to share on the personal side, so I have 4 kids, and my wife and I just had identical twin boys in July. So we're a busy family at the moment. I prior to having kids, my best way to learn was to really like immerse myself where I set time aside from my day job. So, starting in at nights and weekends and find that creativity space and don't just learn for the sake of learning. Like it shouldn't be like, oh, I want to learn Python. Like that's not a motivator that will get you out of bed on a Saturday doing something. It really should be like, I had this idea where I could do X, Y, Z. And then from there, you're like, well, how do I get that done? And it's like, oh, okay, I need to learn a little bit of Python, a little bit of basic Python. So like you kind of need an end goal in mind to stay motivated through some of those harder or boring moments where you're like, what am I doing? It's nice outside. I should walk away from my computer. So have a project and then don't make it the biggest project ever that's going to take a year. Make it something small that's a very clear 1 month goal, and try to build some accountability in. Like let your friends or family know that, hey, I'm doing this, and then they'll ask you about it, and then you want to feel good when you show it to them. So don't try to go like solo. Try to broadcast what you're up to, because then that just gives you more momentum to get you back and leaning in and spending the time on it.
Yeah, I love it. How do you find those people that are, if they're not in your network, what are some ways to get those people? Like online communities, I guess, is one way.
There's really good online communities. So you don't have to, you don't have to have a computer science major, and you don't have to live in San Francisco to be part of a software company. A lot of remote opportunities and roles. So location doesn't matter. I personally am a part of a lot of Slack communities or email newsletters where I'm constantly getting through osmosis just like a beat on what's going on in the world of AI, for instance. Yeah. Or like, a lot of people ascribe to other newsletters to just get a beat of what's going on within the clinical research space. So I think you got to figure out what are your best channels depending on what you're trying to learn. And then people is important. So if you are really excited and motivated to ship this thing, who else would want to be a part of that and do that? Or who else already knows Python and maybe doesn't care about clinical research, but likes being a teacher and a mentor of Python? So I would go to LinkedIn and find people that check that skill box. I would 100% go to hackathons. Anyone that's at a hackathon, like I love hackathons. I've been to a lot in my lifetime, and they're incredibly fun because it's a very time-boxed, let's do something cool with strangers. And maybe you win a prize, and it ends up being like a business. So I would look at hackathons, either just online remote ones or ones that are in your area, and go and find people that are leaning in there. Because if you're sitting at a hackathon on a Saturday and you're writing Python code to integrate with an EHR system, like that person is an interesting person that's going to be doing interesting things in the future. And it's good to try to meet like-minded builders that you might be able to team up with in the future.
I love it. I learned a lot about you while we were having this conversation, and I like the recurring theme that you have about building. So I think it's really powerful. Want to maybe shift our conversation a little bit about like technology at sites. I know you're very passionate about the use of technology at sites and the adoption of technology at sites. Where are we today when it comes to technology adoption? I know people are purchasing technology, but then what's happening?
So we're definitely better than where we were in the past. In the past, everything was paper and, just kind of winging it. And so solutions have developed on the site side and the pharma side to solve some of those challenges and those pain points. Some of those technologies are chosen for and paid for by the site. Some of those technologies are chosen for and paid for by the CRO and sponsor, and then they're telling the site to use those systems on their study. So when it comes to technology, we're further ahead than we were in the past. There's a lot of improvements. But I think if you put yourself in the shoes of a research coordinator and you think about like their day, they're in a lot of systems and they're bouncing around because it's not like a singular like if you're a software developer, you're writing code all day, every day, and you're in the same GitHub code system every day, and like it's very familiar and comfortable, and you can become very productive because it's repeatable, things like that. I always like the example of Excel. So, everyone knows Excel. Everyone can add 5 cells together and do a sum formula. But if you're living and breathing in Excel every day and you're a finance wizard, like you know how to do macros, and you basically have like the most powerful tool on the planet, like sitting in your Excel document.
Sure.
But that takes like time. It takes a reason to invest the time, but you're maximizing the potential of that tool. So I think what's interesting on the site side is because it's a bit of a fragmented set of systems that the site is, trying to put together for their workflows, but also every study that they work on, they're being assigned anywhere from 5 to potentially 15 or 20 new technologies just on that study that they have to have a log into and interact with and figure out and learn how to use. And that's just one study of many that they might be working on. They might be working on a portfolio of 5 or 15 or 20 studies, depending on the organization they're at. So if you're a research coordinator, you're putting yourself in that person's shoes, you're not becoming that Excel macro finance wizard because you're splitting your time across a lot of places, and you are dealing with some systems that maybe your organization chose or some of your organization did not choose, and you're moving data and tasks between the different systems because they're not all integrated, and that's hard. So the day-to-day of being a very proficient research coordinator takes a lot of time to build up that muscle memory and that skill set. And how do you do it in a way that is productive, proficient, is not super stressful, so that you can put your best foot forward on every study that you're working on? The other thing that I think happens too is like a lot of at the site leadership level, you invest in the tool, and then you're like, cool. We were talking about earlier, you got to that finish line. Now, okay, the choice is done. It's a 3-year contract, nothing else to do. But there is a big difference between the tool being fully rolled out to all staff members, so that the staff members themselves are proficient and trained in the tool and not nervous every time they're asked to go log in and do something, but they feel comfortable and are productive. But also there's a lot of capabilities that sites maybe don't fully are aware of or appreciate or turn on, or oftentimes it's a lot of the reporting or the analytics or the metrics that is sitting in a report somewhere, but either you're not as familiar of where to get it or what to do with it. And because you're running your own business, and there's thousands of other sites that are out there that have the same problem, they're just like looking at a report and they're like, do I have too many studies in my pipeline? Do I have not enough? How should I understand current recruitment funnels? Am I paying the right amount CPC on our Facebook ads? These are all things you have to kind of figure out in a vacuum. But you're doing so much at once, and you're not a technology company. So I think that the challenge there is there's just so many things that are going on at a site, so many systems, so many different workflows across the study lifecycle, that just staying afloat is, I think, most folks' goal. But what's a miss there is there's so many optimizations that could be unlocked. It just takes time to discover them and implement them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can think of like softwares that I've signed up for that I don't use on a regular basis, and I know like clearly why for the reasons. So what are the solutions to that? I know you're kind of trying to, you're working in that space, trying to expand like opportunities for sites, or what are some of the things people can do?
Yeah, so if I'm sitting there, if I'm working at a site, I guess there's, you might be an end user of the system because you're a principal investigator or a coordinator, or maybe you're the owner of the site or leadership at a site. I would just want to make sure I'm fully aware of what does our tech stack look like? What gaps do I think exist or compared to my peers? What is my plan to stay up to date about new developments, either within my own vendors that I've already are in my stack, and what are their new capabilities that are coming, and making sure we're getting the most of them when it comes, but also what are some other adjacent technologies that could help me. So to stay up to date, I think, that's where we talked about the conference circuit earlier. A lot of people are active on LinkedIn asking great questions around, who's using what, and people are being open and transparent and sharing recommendations
mm-hmm.
there. You did allude, this is an area that I'm hoping to have an impact in 2025 moving forward. I am starting a consulting business that will help clinical trial sites maximize their technology investments. It's called Full Stack Trials. It's following that theme of what we talked earlier about a full stack developer is someone that isn't specialized in one area. They can do all of the things. They can do database, and they can do backend, and they can do front end, and they can do design, and they're a full stack developer. I really always, that term full stack resonated with me. And I think sites similar have that kind of like, we can't be specialized and just be the best business development group or the best, the most friendly with our patients. We need to do all these things really well. We need to be a full stack site. So the name Full Stack Trials, it's going to be fullstacktrials.com. So looking to build a greater community around sharing of best practices and helping everybody level up their technology investments.
Makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. So if you don't mind, I know at some point in our conversation, you kind of went down the list of all the different technology tools. And I think I've done this in a different episode, like EHR, CTMS, EICF, CRM.
Are any not an acronym? That's the real question. We're good at acronyms.
Patient database. I kind of want to, if you don't mind, can we, and you can say no to this, but I wanted to see if there were like products that you felt like were good fit for sites to use in each of those buckets.
Yeah. I mean, every vendor system is going to have strengths and weaknesses. Not looking to, say this is the de facto winner. Like, I think it's good to have competition. It's good for everybody to have choice and options.
So can we go one by one? Can we start with EHR first, maybe?
Yeah. So, and full transparency. So previous company I worked at, we integrated with the Athena Health EMR. And this was almost 10 years ago. So things have probably changed since then, but I always really liked the company Athena Health because they were one of the first groups to go to the cloud. And they were one of the first groups to lean into building an API so that other companies could come and build capabilities and services on top of them. And they built a marketplace of startups on the Athena Health EMR. So I'm sure others have since done that in the last decade, but they were the leader of the pack there. And so I will always give, the extra kudos to them for having that vision. I do think on the AI side, I don't think it's yet rolled out, but it is going to be very interesting to see Oracle, which acquired Cerner. They are launching from the ground up, completely separate from the Cerner product, an AI-powered, AI-first EMR. And so it'll be interesting to see, is that a leapfrog opportunity where, EHRs are a thing of the past, and now we have something new that's going to be loved by doctors and medical staff? Or is it, more just buzz at the moment and it doesn't get there? I think that'll be a really interesting one to track. Obviously, Epic is going to be a big player here. So, I think in the context of clinical research, you're probably not changing your EHR. That's probably like locked in for a long time.
Sure.
But there are clinical trial modules or other best practices around how maybe like data could get out of the EHR into other systems. And so thinking about what those integration points might be and just being aware of them would be important as you look at that part of your stack.
Yeah. What about CTMS?
Yeah. So on the CTMS side, and again, this goes back to, there's two different types of CTMS.
Yeah. We're talking about site CTMS.
If you're on the site side, like I usually call it a site CTMS just to make sure people don't have the confusion. Definitely a lot of, good competition here. So the logos and names that, if you don't have a CTMS tool, you definitely would want to consider that. It's going to be, you have CRIO, which is clinicalresearch.io. You have Realtime. You have Clinical Conductor. You have Encore. You have Velos. You have a few others that have recently launched. Oh my gosh, I'm drawing the blank on the last one. But the interesting thing there, I would say, is some of those CTMS capabilities and the user bases are more for the academic medical center setting or the big health system. And some might be better for the independent site networks.
I got it.
And so definitely worth taking a look at all of them. And, you can go to ChatGPT and say what other competitors are out there. But the benefits of a CTMS system is it's going to help you with things like scheduling patients, revenue management, pipeline of your studies, potentially eSource. So like what on a different doctor's appointment, like what data are we collecting from the patient? So it's a powerful tool, but it's definitely a tool that I think more and more sites have adopted. And so it's not a like very early at the adoption curve. Like it's starting to become a maturing solution over the past decade. But I think having spent a lot of time at sites, I do think a lot of folks still struggle to what we were talking about earlier of like maximizing are my users using it correctly? Are my integrations set up correctly? And am I making the most of the analysis that is available in my reports to make smart business choices about augmenting our staff or going after a new therapeutic area or what is our, all those things today.
Right.
I think sites are trying to do a good job there, but it's one task of many that they're trying to take on. So it's hard to do it well.
Right. And then the EICF.
The EISF, so that's going to be an electronic investigator site file. This historically would have been a paper binder sitting in an office.
Sure.
So the EISF is an absolute requirement for folks doing clinical research because you need, for regulatory purposes, to have documentation and records of everything you did on that study so that either the pharma and CRO can come in and audit you or the FDA can come in and audit you.
Sure.
I used to work at Florence Healthcare. So Florence Healthcare has an incredible EISF solution in the space. Some of the CTMS players offer EISF as well. Complion is an EISF player. And I think there's a couple other. Clinically would be an option there. So there's definitely a nice, similar competitive market of folks that are building in that area and servicing sites in that area. But I would encourage any sites that today are on paper. There's a lot of reason why your peers and your colleagues have gone digital. It's not just the cost of saving paper. It's the hundreds of man hours of time that your coordinator is not tracking down a doctor to get a wet ink signature. There's tremendous amount of gains when things go digital. And if you're on paper, I think paper's nice because it's familiar and it's the status quo. But once you've seen what's possible, like there's a really strong motivation to make a change and make a switch.
Cool. If you don't mind, a few more. The business development piece, the CRM, would that be something off the shelf?
So on the CRM side, this is a fun one because CRM is a term that lives outside of clinical research. Like most folks, if you have a product you're selling, you're gonna have a sales team and they're gonna be in Salesforce or a Salesforce competitor. So it's no different in clinical research where in order to stay alive as a business, you have to have studies that you're conducting. And so in order to win a study, you have to have relationships with people at the pharma companies, and you have to have conversations with them that show that you're available and you have the right bandwidth and staffing and history and track record. So that's a lot of emails, that's a lot of phone calls, a lot of things to track. And then when they do want to work with you, it's similar to a sales cycle where you know about the opportunity and then you need to fill out a feasibility questionnaire for the opportunity, and then you need to be awarded it, and then you got to then add it to your CTMS system. So the folks that are really doing well on the CRM side, they might be using a Salesforce that they've highly configured to a Salesforce instance highly configured for clinical research. They might be using a company like Devana, which is using the Salesforce infrastructure, but has already kind of made those configurations for you in the context of clinical research. Or you're doing a spreadsheet and you have your Gmail with a bunch of folders and tags and things like that, and you don't maybe have a solution there yet. But at the end of the day, you have to have a robust pipeline of opportunities coming to you, because if that dries up, your business is in trouble. And you might have a big study that is going to be the big revenue maker for you later this year that for no reason of your own, the study goes on hold, and you have to have a lot of seeds planted so that you have a backup or a very rich portfolio, a rich pipeline to draw from.
Absolutely. And then for the patient database, I'm not sure if people just use the EHR as a database, or do you think is there separate things outside?
Yeah, so there's patient data in the EHR.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's interesting there, so not every site actually might have an EHR. If you're
Mm,
part of a health system or part of a doctor's
sure.
office or you're an academic medical center, like you're going to have an EHR because you're doing
I
things
see.
outside of clinical research and you're seeing patients and you're doing other
Mm,
care options.
mm-hmm.
Um, but if you're an independent site and you're focused more on like finding ways to get patients to your door just for the clinical research, you might skip the EHR step
Mm,
because you can go straight to CTMS and you can have the patients living exclusively in
mm,
your CTMS.
mm,
Um, but there are, a lot of ways patients get to your door outside of an EHR. A lot of times the pharma companies will do things like central recruitment campaigns where they'll
mm.
go and spend a lot of their own dollars and, Facebook ads or whatever it might be. They'll find different recruitment strategies to
I see.
funnel referrals to you. And so you need to receive those referrals and run them through your system. So
Mm,
there's definitely different players that are playing in that, like
I see.
receiving and getting into the system space. That's an area. And then I think a lot of people do invest in call centers would be your other way to say like, okay, we have a list of people we can call because they expressed interest 3 years ago when we met them, and now there's a study that's a good fit for them. Or you might have a call center where you are running ads and you have a phone number somewhere and a lot of people are calling in. And so now you're getting patients' information, you're pre-screening them, you're trying to understand, are they a good fit for one of the studies in our portfolio? And now
Mm-hmm.
I got to kind of get them on this path to learning more about that study. So there's different tools there that are not clinical research specific that people use, like automated robo callers and
Mm-hmm.
um, other tooling to help with that pull through.
Got it. With the call centers, are there like clinical research specific call centers that are like
Yeah,
people can tap into?
yeah. Like there are clinical trial site networks that either have staff at a site calling local people, but that's not always
Mm-hmm.
the best use of that person's time.
Right.
So a lot of them will stand up central call centers and be a central business function that is servicing the 15 sites in their site network. Um,
I see.
And so, yeah, lot of phone calls. Because the one thing that I learned when I was in the recruitment world, doing that marketplace between the farm and the patient recruitment companies, the one stat that we heard again and again was if someone raises their hand to participate in research because they were on Facebook and they filled out your screener, or they came in through another channel, they were on WebMD and they saw an ad and they clicked it. Uh, if they fill in that survey and you don't contact them within 24 hours with an immediate email,
You're
text
gonna lose
message,
them.
it was like 80% drop off or something, just that would blew your mind. So that because that warm opportunity goes so fast,
Yeah.
being very responsive there is really important. And
Mm-hmm.
historically, a research coordinator is the busiest person in the office, and they're already
Mm-hmm.
seeing a patient right now. And when they step back from their patient, they have 400 emails in their inbox, and they have a CRA that's calling them that's frustrated about something, and so like one of the last things they would get to is the call back a lead on a future study because they have enough of a fire going on in their current study, and that's
Right.
where that centralized call center probably really like proved why it was necessary.
For a site that's very small, like with one or two centers under the belt, I mean, not having a call center like built in house is going to be expensive. And
Yeah,
so, what can they do?
yeah. I think what's really interesting to your point, your observation there is we talk about sites in a homogenous way, like, oh, it's a site, they'll get me patients. I have 100 sites working on my study, and each of them are going to get me 10 patients. I have 1,000 patients. But when you actually look at a site, the difference of a Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Mount Sinai is very different than a private equity backed site network that has 40 locations and is actively acquiring new sites, and they have a goal to get to 100 sites in the next 2 years, which
Mm-hmm.
is very different than a independent single site owned
Mm-hmm.
by the principal investigator and has been doing this for 15, 20 years and doesn't have, and is self-funded and is not looking to expand and is just doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's more variations, and that's just like like a
Sure.
couple of them. But I think the amount of investment everybody has is different. What their end game is going to be very different. Is research the primary? Like, is that the only way we're making revenue as a business? Or is it, I'm the key opinion leader and I'm one of the top doctors in this therapeutic area. And one aspect of what I do is research, and it's, the pharma will still want to work with me, but like, I'm not thinking about that 24/7. So I think there's definitely different sites types with different characteristics, and then there's different personas within those site types. But to your question about the small 1-2 location, yeah, they're not going to hire probably and build out a dedicated call center, but there is outsourcing options, or it's going to land on the plate of their coordinator staff. But then again, that's an optimization that's missed, because now instead of calling them within 24 hours, they're getting called on Friday afternoon when things finally have settled down for the research coordinator.
Are there any service providers that come to mind with the call center?
I'm not aware of any that are clinical research specific, but there's definitely options out there that people use.
Cool. Awesome. I think those were all my questions. Before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you what resources have helped or books that have helped the way you think, if you wanted to share those with people.
Oh yeah, hold on. I forgot the name of it. So this is a quick Google. Here we go. So for anyone that's active on LinkedIn, in the site space, you're going to come across Brad Hightower and Dan Sfera, both site owners. Incredible, not just the work that they're able to do at their own site, but how they're able to bring the voice of the site to many people online that have not had a chance to work or sit at a site. So definitely, if you're active on LinkedIn, two individuals worth following and tracking. But when I first entered the industry, I read Dan Sfera's book, The Comprehensive Guide to Clinical Research, Practical Handbook for Gaining Insight into the Clinical Research Industry. I think he's provided updated versions over the years, but I have it printed out. It's on my bookshelf, and I've read through it 3 or 4 times over the years. And every time I feel like I learned something new, because it's such a comprehensive coverage of everything that it just gives you that broad exposure you need, and then kind of gives you the itch to be like, oh, I really want to understand that more. Let me go dive in and go research that concept. But he does a nice job of laying it all out for folks to understand.
Cool. Anything else?
Specifically in the context of clinical research?
It doesn't have to be clinical. Yeah, even non-clinical.
There's books that I've read over the years that are more on like the entrepreneurial side of things. So there's a book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel that kind of clicked with me. There's a couple of other entrepreneurial books that I'll share with you that you can include in the meeting notes. But I do find that oftentimes maybe just things are moving so fast now that like some books, if you're trying to learn a skill like a Python, or I want to learn AI, I skipped the book step at that point, because by the time it's a book, it's too late. So I do think there's a lot of good content out there. You just have to find it. So whether that's through these online communities or LinkedIn, a lot of great podcasts. I definitely think there's a good podcast to subscribe to. Brad Hightower has a good podcast. It's really nice. He interviews folks in the industry. So that's one worth taking a look at. And there's a couple others that are health tech specific that I always enjoy listening to.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for the conversation. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Kunal, really appreciate you having me on. Really enjoyed the conversation. It sounds like you had the same kind of like, maybe there's something to this simulation idea. So if anyone's listening and that kind of got you leaning out of your seat, or you're interested in learning more about sites and how sites are using technology, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Mike-Wenger on LinkedIn. And as we mentioned earlier, I'm working on fullstacktrials.com in 2025. So feel free to come check me out.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for listening to the Clinical Trial Podcast. For more exclusive clinical research content to get you to the top of your game, head on over to clinicaltrialpodcast.com.